Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Father's Day Surprise. Greg Morrison woke up to the smell of burnt bacon on Father's Day morning. At 51, he owned a successful chain of automotive repair shops across Chicago, but his real pride came from his family, his wife of 23 years, Melissa, and their 18-year-old son, Tyler. "Dad, wake up. We've got your Father's Day surprise ready." Tyler's voice boomed through the door, not bothering to mask his excitement. Greg smiled, remembering his own humble beginnings in a South Side garage, working nights to save enough for business school. The military had taught him discipline, and his tours in special forces had shaped him into someone who saw patterns where others saw chaos. Those skills served him well in both his personal and professional life. Downstairs, the kitchen was a disaster. Melissa, his beautiful wife with graying blonde hair and the same blue eyes that had captivated him during their college years, was trying to save the breakfast spread while their German shepherd, Duke, cleaned up the spills. "Happy Father's Day, hon," Melissa called, slightly flustered. Tyler insisted on cooking everything himself. Tyler emerged from the pantry, carrying what looked like a small wrapped box. At 6'2", he was an athlete like his father had been, but with his mother's perpetual optimism and love for practical jokes. "Here, Dad. This is my real gift." Tyler handed him the wrapped package with barely contained laughter. Greg unwrapped it to find a DNA testing kit from Genome Track. The box showed happy families discovering their ancestry. "Let's see if you're still my dad." Tyler burst out laughing. "Remember how you always said you hoped I wasn't switched at birth because I got Mom's terrible sense of direction? Well, now we can find out." Everyone laughed. Tyler had been ribbing Greg about genetics for months after his high school biology class. It was a running family joke. Tyler had Melissa's blonde hair but Greg's green eyes, Greg's athletic build but Melissa's stubborn streak. "Very funny, wise guy." Greg ruffled his son's hair. "You do realize this thing also traces ancestry? You might find out you're part Viking or something." "Actually, I already bought 2 kits. I'm doing one too." Tyler grinned. "We can compare and see whose side of the family is more interesting." What nobody knew was that Greg Morrison had done 3 tours in Afghanistan as part of a specialized intelligence unit. He'd been trained to read people, to spot deceptions, to extract information through psychological pressure. These weren't skills that turned off when he retired from service. He'd noticed things lately. Small things. Melissa staying late at her art gallery, inventory nights, more frequently. Tyler becoming oddly protective of his mother's phone. The way they sometimes exchanged glances when he walked into a room mid-conversation. He'd kept quiet, watching, waiting. Old habits die hard. "Well, this should be entertaining," Greg said, examining the kit. "Let's do it. What's the worst that could happen?" Tyler's smile faltered for just a millisecond before returning. Greg caught it. He caught everything. Later that evening, after dinner and cake, Greg found himself in his study reviewing the instructions. The kit required a simple cheek swab and would return results in 6 to 8 weeks. As he sealed his sample, he noticed Melissa watching from the doorway. "Silly gift, wasn't it?" she asked, a slight tremor in her voice that didn't match her casual demeanor. "Boys will be boys," Greg replied neutrally, "though I admit I'm curious about the ancestry part." That night, as Melissa slept beside him, Greg opened the safe in his study and removed a file he'd been building. Photos, timelines, credit card receipts. Nothing conclusive yet, but patterns were emerging. Tomorrow, he'd make a few calls to old contacts. If someone was playing games with his family, they'd chosen the wrong man to deceive. Chapter 2. The Waiting Game. The weeks crawled by with excruciating normalcy. Greg maintained his routine, morning workouts, business meetings, family dinners, while secretly intensifying his investigation. His surveillance training made it easier to notice the small tells. Tyler had become jumpy around his father. The playful son who used to rib him constantly now seemed nervous when they were alone. Greg noticed him checking his mother's location obsessively on his phone. Melissa's behavior was more subtle, but equally telling. She'd started wearing more perfume, updating her wardrobe, speaking Spanish when she thought Greg couldn't hear, languages she hadn't used since college. "Remember when you used to practice Spanish with that professor?" Greg asked casually over dinner one night. "What was his name?" "Alvarez." Melissa's fork clattered against her plate. "Martinez. Professor Martinez. And that was ancient history, Greg." "Right, Martinez." Greg filed the reaction away, just thinking about Tyler's linguistic genetics, wondering if he inherited your talent for languages. 3 weeks into the waiting period, Greg followed Melissa to one of her inventory nights. The art gallery closed at 6, but her Mercedes remained parked on the street until 9:47 p.m. A silver Lexus pulled up at 9:45, registered to a Dr. Rafael Vega. No, not Vega. Not a doctor. Roberto Santos. Real estate developer. Married with 3 kids. Greg ran his plates through an old military database he still had access to. The meeting was brief, just long enough for Melissa to get into Santos's car, lean in close for what looked like an intense conversation, then return to her own vehicle and drive home. How was inventory? Greg asked when she arrived. Exhausting. We found so many pieces that needed cataloging. Melissa's smile was practiced, almost perfect. Almost. At night, Greg pored over his growing dossier. Photos of clandestine meetings. Evidence of a relationship dating back at least 3 years. And something more disturbing, evidence that Tyler had been covering for his mother. The boy had been lying to him. His own son, colluding with his mother's deception. Greg's military training had taught him patience in building operations. You gathered intelligence, analyzed patterns, built a complete picture before striking. The DNA test was just a piece of a larger puzzle he needed to solve. But what kind of picture was emerging? And how deep did the deception go? For weeks in, Greg started his own counter-surveillance. He hired a private investigator, a former colleague from his military days named Sarah Blackburn, to track his wife's movements. What she discovered sent the investigation in an unexpected direction. Roberto Santos isn't just seeing your wife, Sarah reported during a secure call. He's been developing properties in partnership with someone else. Someone very familiar with real estate law and local construction codes. The name on the partnership documents made Greg's blood run cold. Tyler Morrison. His son had been using his business studies to facilitate whatever scheme was unfolding. As the DNA test results deadline approached, Greg prepared for multiple scenarios. He'd already secured legal counsel, financial protections, and several contingency plans. What he couldn't prepare for was the emotional betrayal that was about to unfold. The night before the results were due, Greg found Tyler in the garage, looking nervous as he cleaned his car. Big day tomorrow, Greg observed, watching his son's hands shake slightly. The DNA results? Yeah, should be interesting. Tyler wouldn't meet his eyes. You know what I learned in the military, son? Greg leaned against the workbench. The worst betrayals always come from family, because they're the ones you never see coming. Tyler's face went white, but he said nothing. Sweet dreams, Tyler. Tomorrow's going to be a memorable day. As Greg walked away, he heard his son make a call. The conversation was brief but telling. Mom, I think Dad knows something. The results come tomorrow. We need to be ready. Greg smiled coldly. They had no idea how ready he already was. Chapter 3. The Truth Unleashed. The morning the DNA results were scheduled to arrive, Greg awoke at 5 a.m. to find the house unusually quiet. Neither Melissa nor Tyler had come down to breakfast by the time the doorbell rang at 7:30. The courier handed Greg a sealed envelope. He didn't open it immediately. Instead, he sent a group text, family meeting in the living room. Now, Melissa appeared first, her face carefully composed but her hands trembling. Tyler followed, his eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. Let's see what the gift revealed, Greg said, sitting in his leather armchair while his wife and son perched nervously on the couch. He opened the envelope deliberately, making them wait. The first page showed the standard disclaimer and instructions. He flipped to the ancestry report. Interesting, Greg mused. Looks like I'm 23% Irish, 15% German. No Vikings, though. Sorry, Tyler. He could see both of them practically holding their breath. He turned to the paternity results page. The color drained from Tyler's face before Greg even read it aloud. According to this, there's a 99.9% probability that Tyler Morrison is not my biological son. Melissa screamed. Tyler jumped to his feet. Dad, wait. Let me explain. Sit down. The command voice from Greg's military days made Tyler collapse back onto the couch. Melissa was breathing heavily, her perfectly maintained facade crumbling. Greg, please, it's not what you think. It's exactly what I think, Melissa. And worse. Greg pulled out his phone and displayed a photo. Roberto Santos. The real father, I assume. Melissa's face went ashen. Dad, I'm so sorry. Tyler's voice cracked, tears streaming down his face. I didn't know how to tell you. I found out last year when I needed a blood test for sports. The doctor mentioned my blood type didn't match what was on file from when I was born. And instead of coming to me, you helped cover it up. Greg's voice was ice. You've been helping your mother continue the lie for over a year, creating fake alibis, covering her tracks, building real estate partnerships with the man who's been sleeping with your mother. That was just business. He said it would help pay for college. Stop. Greg's command cut through Tyler's excuse. I know everything. The meetings, the lies, the deception. All of it. Melissa finally found her voice. Greg, please. We can work through this. It was a mistake that happened before Tyler was born. Before he was born? So you already knew. You've been lying to me for 18 years, Melissa. 18 years of raising another man's child while you continued to see him behind my back. It wasn't like that. Roberto and I, we had history, but I chose you. You chose my money, my name, my protection, while carrying on with Santos all these years. Greg stood up, towering over them both. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Did you think I was that blind, that stupid? Tyler spoke up, his voice stronger now. Dad, whatever's happening between you and Mom, I'm still your son. The one you raised. The one you taught to play baseball, helped with homework. The one who betrayed me. The one who used my name, my credit, my reputation to build business deals with his biological father. Greg's eyes were cold. You're Roberto Santos's son. And now you'll learn what that really means. What are you talking about? Melissa's voice quivered. Greg walked to his study and returned with a file folder. I've known about your indiscretions for weeks, Melissa. I've documented everything. The affairs, the lies, the financial manipulations. And I've been preparing. He placed divorce papers on the coffee table. These have already been filed. Given Tyler's age, there's no custody battle, but there's also no inheritance. You're both cut off. Completely. You can't do that. Tyler protested. I'm still your nothing. You're nothing to me. Greg's words hit like physical blows. As of today, neither of you are my family. Neither of you get to claim the Morrison name. Neither of you get a single penny of what I've built. Melissa was sobbing now. Greg, please, we can get counseling. We can do nothing. I want you both out of my house by the end of the day. Take what you came with. Everything else belongs to me. Where are we supposed to go? Tyler asked, the reality sinking in. Ask your real father. I'm sure Roberto Santos will be thrilled to welcome his long-lost family into his life. His wife and 3 legitimate children will love the surprise. The color drained from both their faces. They hadn't considered that angle. You wouldn't, Melissa whispered. Try me. Greg handed her a business card. This is your divorce attorney. Mine has already been notified. And Tyler, I suggest you start packing. Your college fund? Gone. Your trust fund? Dissolved. Your car? It's in my name. Leave the keys. As he walked toward the door, Tyler called after him. Dad, please. I know I made mistakes, but you're still my father. You raised me. Greg turned, his eyes devoid of warmth. A father is more than genetics, Tyler. It's about trust, loyalty, respect. You chose Roberto Santos as your family. Now live with that choice. Where are you going? Melissa asked desperately. To introduce myself to the Santos family. I think they deserve to know the whole truth, don't you? As Greg left his house that morning, he knew this was just the beginning. The DNA test had revealed the surface betrayal, but the true depth of deception and his revenge was yet to come. Chapter 4, Digging Deeper. The Santos family lived in a modern mansion on the North Shore, a testament to Roberto's success in real estate development. Greg watched from his car across the street, observing the Sunday morning routine. Roberto leaving for a golf game. His wife Maria tending to their children ages 12, 10, and 8. He waited until Roberto was gone before approaching the front door. Maria Santos answered, her welcoming smile fading when she saw Greg's grim expression. Can I help you? Mrs. Santos, I'm Greg Morrison. I believe we need to talk about your husband. The color drained from her face. She knew, maybe not everything, but enough to recognize a confrontation when it stood on her doorstep. Please come in, she said quietly, glancing nervously at her children playing in the backyard. In her spotless kitchen, Maria poured coffee with trembling hands. You're the one, aren't you? Melissa's husband. You knew? Not everything. Just whispers, rumors. Roberto has indiscretions. I've tolerated them for the children's sake. Her voice was brittle. But this is different, isn't it? Greg slid the DNA test results across the counter. Your husband has a son, Tyler. He's 18. Been carrying on with my wife for over 2 decades. Maria's cup shattered against the tile floor. A son? Not just an affair, but a child? And recent business partnerships. Tyler's been working with Roberto, building real estate deals using my money, my connections, my name. Maria's composure shattered completely. That bastard. That absolute bastard. She grabbed her phone. You have more? Evidence. Greg showed her his folder, photos, financial records, surveillance logs. With each revelation, Maria's fury grew. By the time he finished, her polished exterior had transformed into cold determination. I want to destroy him, she said finally. Financially, socially, completely. Will you help me? Greg smiled for the first time that morning. I thought you'd never ask. Their alliance formed quickly. Maria knew Roberto's business secrets, his political connections, his hidden vulnerabilities. Greg had the surveillance skills and the methodical mindset to exploit them. Together, they began constructing a trap. He has a major deal closing Friday, Maria revealed. The Lakeside Development Project. $200 million construction contract with the city. He's leveraged everything, including money he's been hiding from me, on this deal. And his partners? A consortium of investors from overseas. Very private, very particular about reputation. Maria's eyes gleamed. If they knew about his family situation, his deceptions, his double life. Greg considered the implications. We need more than domestic drama to sink a deal that size. Oh, we have more. Maria opened her laptop. I've been keeping records for years, waiting for the right moment. Bribes, falsified inspections, code violations covered up. Roberto's empire is built on corruption. We just need to light the fuse. Their plan took shape over the next hours. Greg would use his old military contacts to expose the international corruption. Maria would provide insider information about Roberto's accounts and properties. Combined with the personal betrayal, a secret child, decades of deception, they could create a scandal that would destroy not just Roberto, but everyone connected to his schemes. Back home, Greg found Melissa still there, packing slowly as if hoping for reprieve. Tyler had already left, unable to face his father. Maria Santos sends her regards, Greg announced. You'll be seeing her lawyer tomorrow. Melissa spun around. You told her? How could you be so cruel? Cruel? I'm just telling the truth, Melissa. Something you seem allergic to. Greg watched her resume packing. Where's Tyler? At Roberto's. I told him to try to explain, try to mend things. Good. They should get to know each other better. Greg smiled coldly. Because after Friday, they're both going to need all the family support they can get. Later that night, Greg met with Sarah Blackburn again. She brought troubling news. There's something you need to know about Tyler, she said, sliding photos across the table. He's not just working real estate with Roberto. He's been doing other things. Darker things. The images showed Tyler entering a warehouse district at night, meeting with men Greg didn't recognize. Cash exchanges. Packages being loaded into cars. Drug runners, Sarah confirmed. Small time now, but Roberto's been grooming him. Tyler thinks he's learning the business. He has no idea he's being set up as a fall guy for Roberto's side operations. Greg's jaw tightened. How deep is Tyler involved? Deep enough to go to prison if this gets exposed the wrong way. Sarah paused. I thought you should know before you decide how far to take this. Greg stared at the photos. Tyler, his son, but not his son, had fallen deeper into corruption than even he suspected. The boy was being manipulated, groomed to take the fall for crimes he barely understood. Tell me everything, Greg said finally. Every detail. As Sarah elaborated on the criminal network, Greg realized the Santos family was more than corrupt. They were running a multi-layered operation that used legitimate business as cover for much darker activities. Roberto had inherited this network from his father and was now passing it to his son. To Tyler, the betrayal ran deeper than genetics. They were stealing Tyler's future, setting him up for destruction while using him to access Greg's networks and reputation. By midnight, Greg had a new plan. One that would not only expose Roberto's crimes, but save his son from a future behind bars. Because despite everything, despite the lies and betrayal, he couldn't abandon the boy he'd raised to a life of crime. The DNA test had started this revelation. Maria Santos's alliance had expanded it. But what Greg was planning now would shake the entire city of Chicago to its foundations. Chapter 5. Shadows and Secrets. Greg spent the next day buried in his study, cross-referencing information from Maria Santos with his own surveillance data. She proved to be an invaluable ally, providing access to Roberto's personal files, financial records, and even security camera footage from their home. "I've been documenting his affairs for years," Maria explained during a secure call. "But I never suspected he had a child. How did Melissa hide Tyler all these years?" "By making me think he was mine," Greg replied bitterly. "By creating the perfect family facade while living a double life." The deeper he dug, the more shocked he became. Roberto wasn't just having an affair. He was running an elaborate criminal enterprise that stretched from legitimate real estate to drug trafficking, money laundering, and worse. Tyler was being groomed not just as a business partner, but as an unwitting accomplice. At 3 a.m., Greg's military training kicked in as he heard footsteps on his front porch. His security system had been disabled, professionally, by someone with skills. Someone like him. The intruder was Tyler, moving silently through the darkened house. Greg watched through hidden cameras as his son entered his study and began photographing his files. When Tyler turned to leave, Greg stepped out of the shadows. "I taught you better than that." Tyler jumped, dropping his phone. "Dad, I was just stealing my investigation for Roberto." Greg's voice was cold. "Did you also come to place the listening devices I found yesterday?" "I'm sorry, Stop apologizing and start talking. What does Roberto have planned for the Lakeside deal?" Tyler hesitated before answering. "He's using it to move something bigger than money. Humans, Dad. Women and children from overseas. The construction contract creates perfect cover for trafficking." The revelation hit Greg like a physical blow. "You knew about this?" "I found out by accident. I thought it was just real estate. When I discovered what was really happening, it was too late. He owns me now, Dad. He has evidence that implicates me in enough crimes to put me away for life." Greg studied his son's face. The boy looked terrified, trapped, just as Roberto had planned. "That evidence is fake," Greg concluded. "He manufactured it to control you. Classic intelligence operation. But the photos, the video, can be fabricated. I should know. I used to create them for the military." Greg's expression softened slightly. "You're being played, Tyler. Roberto's setting you up to take the fall for his operation." Tyler sank into a chair, the weight of realization crushing him. "What have I done? You've given us leverage." Greg handed him a phone. "Take this. Agree to everything Roberto says. But record it all. Every conversation, every instruction, every meeting. Can you do that? Why are you helping me? After everything I've done. Because you're my son. Genetics don't change that." Greg's voice was firm. "But understand this. You're going to help me bring them down. All of them. Including Melissa." Tyler looked up, shocked. "Mom's involved in the trafficking? How do you think she's been maintaining her art gallery on the amount she claims to make? The gallery is a front for laundering money. She's been part of this from the beginning." The next morning, Greg met with Maria Santos again, this time at a secure location provided by his former military contacts. She brought stunning news of her own. Roberto's meeting with the City Planning Commission tomorrow night to finalize the Lakeside deal. But there's a private session first, just him and Commissioner Wu. "Bribery?" Greg asked. "Much worse. Wu has a daughter, Elena. She's been working at Melissa's gallery for the past year as an intern. Roberto's been using her as leverage to ensure Wu's cooperation." The pieces were falling into place. Melissa's gallery wasn't just money laundering. It was a recruitment center for Roberto's human trafficking operation. Young women came seeking art careers and ended up trapped in something far darker. "We need to move before the commission meeting," Greg decided. "Once that deal closes, their entire network becomes active. Hundreds of victims." "What's the plan?" Maria asked. Greg spread out a map of Chicago, marking locations with red pins. "We hit them everywhere at once. The gallery, the warehouse, the holding house they're using on the west side. We expose everything simultaneously. And Tyler? Melissa? They'll have to choose sides." Today, that evening, Greg confronted Melissa one final time. She was in the kitchen, pretending everything was normal while packing the last of her belongings. "I know about the girls," he said without preamble. "The ones you recruit at the gallery. Her wine glass shattered on the floor. What are you talking about? The human trafficking. Using art as bait to lure young women. How many, Melissa? How many lives have you destroyed? You're insane, she whispered, backing away. I would never. Stop lying. Greg's roar filled the room. I have evidence. Photos, testimony, financial records. You're part of Roberto's trafficking network. You've been recruiting girls for years. Melissa's facade cracked completely. I had no choice. Roberto said if I didn't help, he'd expose everything about Tyler. About us. He'd destroy both our lives. So you destroyed other lives instead? Greg's disgust was palpable. How many girls, Melissa? How many? She collapsed against the counter, sobbing. Dozens. Maybe more. I lost count. They came seeking careers, opportunities. Roberto promised them jobs, visas, futures. Instead you sold them like livestock. Greg pulled out his phone and began recording. Say it again. All of it. Where are they keeping the girls now? Hours later, armed with Melissa's confession and Tyler's recordings, Greg activated the plan. A synchronized strike by federal authorities hit every location in the Santos network simultaneously. The warehouse, the holding house, the gallery, even Roberto's office, all raided within minutes of each other. Tyler had planted evidence implicating Roberto, following Greg's instructions to frame him perfectly. Maria had provided financial records proving the scope of the operation. And Melissa's confession tied the entire network together. By dawn, Roberto Santos was in federal custody, charged with human trafficking, money laundering, and a dozen other felonies. Melissa was arrested at Greg's home, pleading uselessly for mercy she'd never shown her victims. Tyler sat in Greg's study, watching the news coverage with tears streaming down his face. I didn't know, Dad. I swear I didn't know it was this bad. Now what? Tyler asked finally. Now you become a witness. You tell the truth, you help prosecute them all, and you try to become the man I raised you to be. Greg's voice was hard, but not unkind. You're still my son, Tyler. But you've got a lot to answer for. As federal agents led Melissa away in handcuffs, she screamed at Greg. You're destroying our family. You destroyed our family, Greg replied coldly. I'm just exposing the truth. The DNA test had started as a joke, a Father's Day gift that revealed genetic secrets. But the real revelation was the depth of evil hiding beneath suburban normalcy. And Greg Morrison, the man they thought they knew, had proven more dangerous than any of them imagined. Chapter 6. Burning Bridges. The federal investigation moved swiftly once the evidence was presented. With Tyler's recordings, Melissa's confession, and Maria Santos's inside knowledge, the prosecution built an airtight case against Roberto and his entire organization. Greg watched it all unfold from his private command center, feeling neither satisfaction nor victory, only the cold certainty that justice was being served. The preliminary estimates are staggering, Sarah Blackburn reported via secure video call. 87 women trafficked over 5 years. Millions in laundered money. Political connections at every level of Chicago's power structure. And Tyler? Greg asked. The DA has agreed to immunity in exchange for testimony. Your boy's going to walk, Greg, but he'll have to live with what he knew. Greg nodded. Tyler had been manipulated, but he wasn't innocent. The line between victim and accomplice was thinner than anyone wanted to admit. Meanwhile, Maria Santos had filed for divorce and seized control of Roberto's legitimate assets. The offshore accounts were frozen, their properties seized, their social standing destroyed. Robert's children with Maria were being shielded from the worst of the publicity, but their lives would never be the same. I want them to know, Maria told Greg during one of their strategy sessions. Roberto's children, I want them to know they have a half-brother. Tyler is their family. Maybe something good can come from this mess. Greg considered the suggestion. Tyler had lost one family through deception, but perhaps he could find another in the truth. The DNA test results sat framed on Greg's desk, a reminder of how one moment could shatter years of carefully constructed lies. But what haunted him wasn't the betrayal itself, but how perfectly he'd been deceived. How many dinners, vacations, celebrations had been based on a fundamental lie. I raised Roberto's child, he mused to Sarah one evening. Paid for his education, taught him to be a man, loved him as my own. And all the while, they were laughing behind my back. Some of them were, Sarah corrected. But Tyler was a victim too. Remember that. The night before the trial began, Tyler requested a meeting. Greg hesitated before agreeing, choosing a neutral location, a park overlooking Lake Michigan. "I wanted to thank you," Tyler began, struggling with words, "for protecting me, for saving me from myself." "I didn't do it for you," Greg replied coldly. "I did it because it was right. Because those girls deserve justice. I know, and I'm going to testify. Tell everything I know." Tyler's voice shook. "But I need you to know something. All these years, all the lies, all the deception, there was one truth that never changed. You were my father, the only one who mattered." Greg's jaw tightened. "Biology says otherwise. Biology is just genetics, Dad. You taught me that family is about more than blood. About honor, loyalty, trust." Tears welled in Tyler's eyes. "I betrayed those values. I chose lies over truth, greed over integrity. I became exactly what you taught me never to be. And now," Greg asked, "now I make it right. I testify, I expose every detail of their operation, and I accept the consequences." Tyler paused. "But I'll never stop hoping that someday you'll see me as your son again." Greg stood up, looking out over the dark water. "The boy I raised would never have betrayed me, would never have helped traffic human beings, would never have lied to my face for a year while plotting with my enemies." He turned to face Tyler. "That boy is dead to me, but maybe someone better can be reborn from his ashes." With that, Greg walked away, leaving Tyler alone on the bench. The trial became a media sensation. Roberto Santos, once one of Chicago's most respected developers, was revealed as the head of an international trafficking ring. His legitimate business empire crumbled as investors fled and contracts were canceled. Melissa's art gallery was revealed as a trafficking front, destroying her reputation and ending her social relevance permanently. She faced decades in prison, her carefully constructed image of gracious sophistication replaced by the reality of greed and moral corruption. Commissioner Wu resigned in disgrace when his daughter's involvement was exposed. The scandal rippled through Chicago's political establishment, toppling careers and shattering alliances. Through it all, Greg remained stoic, methodical, and utterly ruthless. He provided evidence that ensured maximum sentences, refused plea deals that might lighten anyone's punishment, and rejected all attempts at reconciliation. "You're destroying them," Maria observed during one of their final meetings. "I'm letting them destroy themselves," Greg corrected. "I'm just making sure their victims get justice." On the final day of the trial, as verdicts were read and sentences handed down, Greg sat alone in the courtroom's back row. Roberto Santos received life in prison. Melissa got 30 years. Multiple accomplices faced various sentences, their lives ruined. Tyler sat in the witness protection area, his testimony having sealed his mother's and biological father's fates. He didn't look at Greg. As Greg left the courthouse, reporters surrounded him. The story of betrayal and revenge had captivated the nation. The wronged father who had dismantled an entire criminal empire. "How do you feel now that justice has been served?" one reporter asked. Greg paused, considering the question. "Justice isn't just about punishment," he said finally. "It's about exposing truth and protecting the innocent. The innocent are safe now. The truth is revealed. Justice has been served." That night, alone in his house, Greg burned the DNA test kit packaging. The genetic truth that had started this revelation was now just paper and plastic turning to ash. But the real truth about courage, betrayal, loyalty, and redemption would burn in his memory forever. The flames died down, leaving only smoke and bitter understanding. Greg Morrison had learned that sometimes the worst wounds come from those you trust most. And sometimes, destroying everything is the only way to rebuild. Somewhere in the city, Tyler was beginning a new life under a new name. Melissa was beginning decades in prison. Roberto's empire lay in ruins. And Greg Morrison sat alone, surrounded by the ashes of his former family. Forgiveness was for those who deserved it. Truth was for everyone, no matter how devastating. The DNA test had been a joke. The vengeance was deadly serious. Chapter 7. The First Spark. The courtroom fell silent as Greg Morrison took the stand. 3 months after the initial arrests, the case against Roberto Santos and his trafficking network was the most closely watched trial in Chicago's history. Greg's testimony would seal their fate. "Mr. Morrison," the prosecutor began, You were married to Melissa Morrison for 23 years and raised Tyler Morrison as your son. When did you first suspect something was wrong? The DNA test was the confirmation, Greg replied evenly. But I'd known something was off for months. My military training taught me to recognize patterns of deception. The prosecutor nodded. And what did you discover? That my entire adult life had been a lie. Greg's voice cut through the courtroom like steel. That my wife had been part of a criminal organization that destroyed lives for profit. That the son I raised was being groomed as a criminal while pretending to be a college student. Melissa sat at the defense table, her carefully maintained composure crumbling as Greg detailed her involvement in the trafficking operation. The art gallery facade. The recruiting methods. The victims. Describe for the court what happened after you received the DNA results. The prosecutor instructed. Greg pulled out a folder of documents. I activated protocols I'd learned in special forces. Documentation, surveillance, strategic planning. I identified every member of their network, every operation, every victim. His eyes found Melissa's, and I decided to burn it all down. The defense attorneys objected repeatedly as Greg laid out the scope of the conspiracy. But each objection was overruled as the evidence mounted: recordings, financial documents, witness statements. The web of lies unraveled thread by thread. Your Honor, Greg concluded, these people didn't just betray my trust. They trafficked human beings. They ruined lives. They deserve the maximum penalty the law allows. During a break in testimony, Tyler approached Greg in the courthouse hallway. Federal protection officers flanked him, but Greg's former son managed to get close enough to speak. I've been testifying all week, Tyler said nervously. Giving them everything I know. Trying to make this right. Trying to save yourself, Greg corrected coldly. Fear is a powerful motivator. It's not just fear, Dad. I mean, Greg. Tyler struggled with what to call him. I hate what they made me part of. The girls they hurt. The lives they destroyed. I wish I'd come to you sooner. Wishes are worthless. Actions matter. Greg's expression remained hard. You're helping now because you have no choice. Not because it's the right thing to do. That's not fair. You want fair? Ask the 87 women your mother recruited into slavery what's fair. Greg stepped closer. You enabled monsters, Tyler. Your testimony won't erase that. With that, Greg walked away, leaving Tyler staring after him with tears in his eyes. Back in the courtroom, Roberto Santos finally took the stand in his own defense. The once powerful developer had aged decades in 3 months. His suit hung loose, his confident swagger replaced by nervous fidgeting. The defense painted him as a victim of circumstance, forced into criminality by unseen forces. But Greg's testimony had already destroyed that narrative. Mr. Santos, the prosecutor began, you raised Tyler Morrison as your biological son for 18 years while he lived with Mr. Morrison as his father. How do you justify this deception? Roberto's answer was cut off by an outburst from Melissa. You bastard. You told me Greg could never find out. You promised. The judge gavelled for order, but the damage was done. The facade of criminal sophistication crumbled into a petty argument between conspirators turning on each other. As the day ended, Greg found himself intercepted by Maria Santos outside the courthouse. The children want to meet Tyler, she said without preamble. They deserve to know their half-brother. Your choice, Greg replied. But remember who raised him. Remember what he became. Both of my boys will see him, Maria insisted. But my daughter. She hesitated. She wants to meet you. To thank you for exposing what her father really was. Greg considered the request. Next week. After this is over. After this is over, Maria agreed. It will never really be over for any of us. She was right, of course. Truth doesn't just expose, it transforms. The perfect family Greg thought he had was a lie, but the fallen family he'd helped destroy was real. Both truths would haunt him forever. That night, Greg sat in his study going through old family photos. Tyler as a baby, their first fishing trip, high school graduation. Each image now carried new meaning, new pain. His phone buzzed with a secure message. Final prosecutorial moves tomorrow. They're trying last-minute deals to save themselves. Sarah. Greg smiled coldly. Let them beg. Let them plead. Let them learn what he'd learned. That betrayal leaves scars that never fully heal, and that justice, however brutal, is the only balm for such wounds. Tomorrow would bring the prosecution's closing arguments. The day after, The jury would deliberate. By week's end, justice would be served. But Greg Morrison's real reckoning was yet to come. The DNA test had revealed genetic truth, but the deeper truth about family, loyalty, and betrayal still waited to be fully understood. Chapter 8. The Unraveling. The morning sky was slate gray as Greg arrived at the courthouse for the final day of testimony. Media vans lined the street, satellite dishes raised like technological sentinels bearing witness to the destruction of what had once been one of Chicago's most respected families. Inside, the atmosphere was electric with tension. The prosecution prepared to present its closing evidence, a devastating compilation of testimony, documents, and recordings that would leave no doubt about the defendant's guilt. The defense will attempt a sympathy play, Sarah warned Greg. They'll try to paint Melissa as a victim, Tyler as an innocent manipulated by older predators. Let them try, Greg replied grimly. I have a few surprises of my own. The bombshell came during the prosecution's closing presentation. New evidence had surfaced overnight, a memory card found hidden in Melissa's art gallery safe, containing years of secret recordings. Your Honor, the prosecutor announced, holding up the small device. This contains recordings made by Melissa Morrison herself, documenting the trafficking operation from its inception. The courtroom erupted. Melissa's attorneys scrambled for an objection, but the judge allowed the evidence to be presented. The first recording played, Melissa's voice, clear and calculating, discussing recruitment quotas with Roberto. The younger ones fetch better prices. Make sure the modeling scouts know we're looking for girls who won't be missed. Melissa's face went white. The second recording was even more damning. Tyler's voice joining the conversation. I can access Dad's client list through his computer. Lots of out-of-towners there. Perfect customers. Tyler slumped in his witness chair, his immunity deal suddenly feeling very fragile. Your Honor, Greg's attorney stood. We have additional evidence that goes beyond trafficking. Evidence that Mrs. Morrison was planning something far more personal. A new recording played, one that made even the seasoned prosecutors gasp. We need to handle the Greg problem permanently, Melissa's voice stated coldly. The insurance policies, the business assets, everything needs to be secured before he discovers the truth about Tyler. If he won't die in an accident, we'll have to arrange something more direct. Roberto's voice responded. I have contacts. People who can make it look like a business deal gone wrong. But we need to be careful. Greg isn't like other targets. He's just a businessman now, Melissa dismissed. He's forgotten what he was. That's what worries me, Roberto replied. The courtroom exploded in chaos. Melissa collapsed, hyperventilating. Roberto shouted denials. Tyler covered his face with his hands, finally understanding the full extent of the conspiracy he'd been part of. During the recess, Greg found himself alone with Melissa in a courthouse waiting room, a confrontation arranged by their attorneys as a last-ditch attempt at reconciliation. You were going to have me killed, Greg stated flatly. I was scared, Melissa whispered. Desperate. Once Roberto found out you suspected Tyler wasn't yours, he said we had to act first. He said you would destroy us all. He was right. Greg's voice was ice. But not for the reasons he thought. I wasn't angry about Tyler's paternity. I was angry about the lies. About the trafficking. About young women being sold like commodities while you played the cultured art dealer. You could have had an accident, she continued as if she hadn't heard. Quick, painless. We would have mourned you properly. Tyler would have gotten your business, your money. It would have been clean. Clean. Greg's laugh was harsh. Murder is never clean, Melissa. But then, you've been drowning in blood for years, haven't you? All those girls whose lives you destroyed, their blood is on your hands. They made choices. They were lied to. Manipulated. Trafficked. Greg's control finally snapped. Just like you lied to me. Manipulated me. Used me for decades while planning to have me killed. The door burst open as security moved to separate them, but the damage was done. Melissa's confession had been recorded, adding attempted murder to her charges. That afternoon, as closing arguments began, Greg sat in the gallery next to Maria Santos and her children. Her daughter, Isabella, now 16, had specifically asked to meet the man who'd exposed her family's secrets. You saved a lot of girls, she whispered to Greg as the prosecutor detailed the scope of the trafficking operation, including some of my friends. They were going to travel to modeling shoots organized through Mrs. Morrison's gallery. Your father, Greg began. My father is a monster, Isabella stated flatly. And I'm glad you stopped him. Her words carried more weight than any testimony, any evidence, any recording. The next generation was seeing the truth, learning from their parents' crimes, choosing a different path. The jury deliberated for only 6 hours. Roberto Santos, guilty on all counts, including trafficking, money laundering, attempted murder, and racketeering. Sentence: life without parole. Melissa Morrison, guilty on all counts, including trafficking, conspiracy to commit murder, and obstruction of justice. Sentence: 50 years to life. Multiple co-conspirators received lengthy sentences. The trafficking ring was dismantled. The victims were rescued and provided with support. As the verdicts were read, Tyler sat in the back of the courtroom, his immunity deal intact, but his conscience clearly not. When Greg passed him on the way out, Tyler stood. Dad, Mr. Morrison, I'm sorry doesn't begin to cover it. No, it doesn't. Greg paused. But you helped bring them down. You saved those girls when you could have stayed silent. Maybe that's enough for a court of law. For me, he shook his head. You'll have to live with what you've done. I want to make amends, Tyler insisted. Use the business skills you taught me to help the victims. Start organizations that protect vulnerable people. Become what you tried to raise me to be. Then do it, Greg said finally. Not for forgiveness. Not for redemption. But because it's right. Outside the courthouse, Greg faced an ocean of cameras and microphones. The story had transcended crime. It was about betrayal at the deepest level, about the lies that hide in plain sight, about the devastating power of truth. Mr. Morrison, how do you feel now that justice has been served? Greg considered the question carefully. Justice isn't satisfaction. It's not revenge. It's truth in action. My family was a lie. That lie was hurting people. The DNA test exposed the first crack in the deception. Everything that followed was truth forcing its way out, no matter how much pain it caused. Will you reconcile with Tyler? Another reporter asked. Tyler has to reconcile with himself before he can reconcile with anyone else, Greg replied. The same goes for all the victims of this conspiracy. Truth is just the beginning of healing. As he walked away from the courthouse, Greg felt no triumph, no satisfaction. Just the hollow emptiness of shattered illusions and the faint hope that maybe, somehow, truth could build something better from the ashes of betrayal. The DNA test had been a joke. The reality was devastating. But sometimes devastation clears the ground for new growth. Chapter 9: Ashes of Betrayal. 6 months after the trial's conclusion, Greg Morrison sat in his renovated study, now free of family photos and memorabilia. The room felt cleaner somehow, purged of the lies that had infected every corner of his former life. The DNA test results still hung framed on the wall, not as a reminder of betrayal, but as a symbol of truth's power to expose hidden corruption. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Sarah Blackburn entered, carrying a thick folder. The Victim Support Fund is fully operational, she reported. Tyler's been working with the foundation 20 hours a day. The kid's determined to make amends. The kid, Greg repeated softly. Still think of him that way sometimes. He's reaching out to Maria's family, Sarah continued. Building relationships with his biological siblings. Isabella says they meet for lunch every Sunday. Greg nodded. Good. He needs family. Just not mine. Sarah studied her former colleague. You're still punishing yourself, Greg, for not seeing it sooner. I taught Tyler everything he knew, Greg countered. How to read people, how to spot deception, how to build trust. He used those skills to help traffic human beings. That's on me. No, it's on them. Melissa and Roberto. They corrupted him. Sarah placed a hand on Greg's shoulder. But you saved him from becoming them completely. That counts for something. Later that evening, Greg attended a fundraiser for the victims' support organization Tyler had established. He stayed in the background, watching his former son, now known as Tyler Morrison Santos, speak passionately about redemption and responsibility. I was part of something evil, Tyler told the audience. Not because I was evil, but because I chose comfort over conscience, loyalty to family over morality. The man who raised me taught me better, but I forgot those lessons until the cost became unbearable. From across the room, Tyler's eyes found Greg's. A moment of recognition passed between them, not as father and son, but as two people forever changed by truth. After the speech, Maria Santos approached Greg at the bar. never truly be your son again, will he? No, Greg confirmed. But he might become a better man than I could have raised. And Melissa? Maria asked. Have you? She writes letters. I don't read them. Greg sipped his whiskey. Some betrayals exceed the capacity for forgiveness. My children ask about her sometimes, Maria admitted. Wonder if they'll have another mother. I tell them that some people aren't meant to be in our lives, no matter their biology. That's what I tell myself about Tyler, Greg agreed. Daily. The following week brought unexpected news. Melissa Morrison, facing 50 years to life, had developed terminal cancer. Medical reports gave her 6 months at most. She's asking to see you, Sarah reported. Final conversation. She says there are truths still untold. Greg considered the request for 3 days before agreeing. The federal prison's medical wing was a stark contrast to the luxury Melissa had known. She looked ancient in her hospital gown, ravaged by disease and guilt. You came, she whispered as Greg sat beside her bed. I'm here for the truth, he replied. Nothing else. The truth, Melissa repeated with a bitter laugh. Roberto wasn't Tyler's father either. The revelation hit Greg like a physical blow. His real father was Carlos Alvarez, Roberto's cousin, the one who died in that car accident 15 years ago. Melissa's words came faster, urgency driven by approaching death. Roberto's been lying to himself all these years, taking credit for another man's child while planning to use Tyler to expand his empire. Greg processed the information. Does Tyler know? No. And Roberto might never believe it. The test I had done privately, the one that told me Tyler wasn't yours, also told me he wasn't Roberto's. But I needed Roberto's protection, his resources. So I lied. Again. And Carlos? Greg asked. Who was he to you? My first love. Before you, before Roberto. He died never knowing about Tyler. Tears traced paths down Melissa's gaunt cheeks. I kept thinking if I could just maintain the lie long enough, it wouldn't matter whose son he was. He'd be yours in every way that counted. Until greed destroyed even that fiction, Greg concluded. I'm sorry, Melissa whispered. For everything. For the trafficking, for the deception, for trying to have you killed. I thought I was protecting my future. Instead, I destroyed everything. Yes, Greg agreed simply. You did. Will you tell Tyler? She asked. About Carlos? That's for you to decide. You still have time. Melissa closed her eyes. Then I'll write him. One final truth in a lifetime of lies. Greg left knowing he'd never see her again. Some endings were just that. Endings, without resolution or reconciliation. A month later, he received a package. Tyler's first book about the trafficking case and his role in exposing it. The dedication read, To the man who taught me that truth matters more than comfort. I'm sorry I forgot. Greg read it in one sitting. The writing was raw, honest, unflinching in its self-examination. Tyler had laid bare his own culpability, his gradual seduction by greed and family loyalty, his belated awakening to the horror he'd enabled. The final chapter detailed his ongoing work with trafficking victims, his attempts to rebuild using the business acumen Greg had taught him, his tentative relationships with his biological siblings. There was no plea for forgiveness, no appeal to sentiment, just the facts of redemption sought through action. Greg sent Tyler a single text, truth well told. Keep writing. On what would have been their 25th anniversary, Greg received word that Melissa had died in prison. The letter she'd written to Tyler about Carlos arrived the same day. Tyler called that evening. Their first direct conversation since the trial. She told me everything, Tyler said without preamble. About Carlos, about how she used everyone, about the webs within webs of deception. How do you feel about it? Greg asked. Lost. Found. Angry. Relieved. Tyler's voice trembled. I spent 18 years thinking I was your son, 2 years thinking I was Roberto's. Now I learn I'm neither. Who am I? You're the person you choose to become, Greg replied. The same advice he'd given when Tyler was 12 and struggling with bullies at school. DNA is just data. Character is choice. Silence stretched between them. Will you ever forgive me? Tyler asked finally. Forgiveness isn't the point anymore, Greg said. You've dedicated your life to helping the victims of her crimes, our crimes. That's what matters. But we're not family anymore. We were never family by blood. We were family by trust. You broke that trust. Now you're building something different, not family, but something equally valuable. Keep building. A year after the trial, Greg attended Tyler's college graduation ceremony. He watched from the back row as Tyler received his degree, business with a minor in social justice. After the ceremony, they shook hands formally, like old colleagues. "Thank you for coming," Tyler said. "I came to see what you've become," Greg replied. "I'm glad I did." That was enough. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but acknowledgement of growth from ashes. Back in his study, Greg moved the framed DNA test to a different wall. Next to it, he hung a photo of 87 young women, the trafficking victims saved by exposing the truth. Tyler's book sat on his desk, alongside reports from the Victim Support Organization. The Father's Day joke had become a catalyst for justice. The betrayal had spawned redemption. The broken family had saved countless strangers. Truth, Greg reflected, was always brutal. But sometimes brutality was necessary to burn away corruption and allow something better to grow. He opened his laptop to a blank document. Time to tell his own story. About the DNA test that shattered illusions, the betrayals that ran deeper than genetics, and how exposing truth, however devastating, ultimately served justice. The first sentence came easily. Trust is like a perfect crime scene. One contamination ruins everything. Sometimes endings weren't happy. Sometimes they were just true. And sometimes, Greg Morrison had learned, truth was enough. The DNA test had been a joke. The revenge was real. The healing was still in progress. And that, perhaps, was the most honest ending of all. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.